Your Dog's Friend is a nonprofit 501c3 whose mission is to help keep dogs out of shelters by educating and supporting their humans. We promote positive method of training and behavior modification through stress-free methods. As part of that mission, we offer free webinars like the one you're about to watch. Subjects range from dog behavior, stress-free training, and other tools to help you understand your relationship with your dog. If you like the webinar, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Click the notification bell and subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you'll be notified when future videos are posted. Now enjoy the webinar.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, which is hosted by Your Dog's Friend. I'm so glad you could join us today because today's topic, which is barking, seems to be a very popular one. Our speaker is Karen Baragona, who is the trainer behind Eager Beagle Dog Training in Arlington, Virginia. And she's also a behavior and training consultant with the Animal Welfare League of Arlington. I know that you're going to learn a lot today about today's topic, barking. I need to learn about it too. And I'm turning it over to you, Karen.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Deborah. Before I get started, I just want to say how much I love this organization, Your Dog's Friend. I've done a few presentations through this organization in the past, and I think not a day goes by that I don't refer a client or an adopter to the resources and classes and webinars and all the information on Your Dog's Friend's website. So, all right, let's get started. Just a word of, warning. My own dog has decided to join me here, and she's looking out the window. And so we may have a live demonstration of some of the things that we're going to be talking about today, but hopefully she'll, we'll see what she does. Okay. So I wanted to start off with a little bit of background about just understanding, understanding barking. Because I think it's a really sort of misunderstood phenomenon, right? Dogs are not just making noise. I like this little cartoon because this is one dog talking to the other saying, let's bark at nothing. And sometimes it seems that way, right? Because they just bark so much sometimes, but it's not for nothing. It's not just noise. It has a function. It has a meaning. It can be guarding. It can be warning us, warning other dogs. It can be a request to get something to go farther away. It's often communication during play with other dogs and with us. It's often to ask us to pay attention to them. And then there's also something I just sort of jokingly call commentary barking, because my dog is a hound and she's very vocal. And sometimes she'll bark and I think what she's saying is, God, that's a really big dog. Did you see that? So sometimes I think they're just saying, they're just kind of saying what's on their mind. And why should we listen? Sometimes we just want them to stop, right? But they're telling us things. They're expressing their emotions. They are talking to us. And I love this book called Inside of a Dog by Alexandra Horowitz, who's a cognitive researcher on dogs. And she says in her book, given the relative scarcity of barking in wolves, which are, our dog's kind of closest relatives, some theorize that dogs have developed a more elaborate barking language precisely in order to communicate with humans. So think about that. What are they saying? This is like everyone's dream who's a dog lover to have, you have that Dr. Dolittle complex. Like, if we could talk to the animals. Speak.
Hi there.
Did that dog just say hi there?
Oh, yes.
Brah!
My name is Doug. I have just met you, and I love you. My master made me this collar. He is a good and smart master, and he made me this collar so that I may talk. Squirrel!
Speak.
Hi there.
So I don't know if you've seen that movie Up. I've seen it because I have kids, but I also I love a talking dog. I wish we could understand everything they say. But, I think those of us who have a dog and know our dog well and hear our dog doing all sorts of different barking can kind of suss out what they're saying. And there's so many things that they're saying sometimes, and I won't read this whole list. I'll just kind of give you a chance to take it in. I'll be quiet for a second. So just a couple examples. Dogs bark sometimes when they're just wanting something to go away. And we see this a lot with leash reactivity, dogs just kind of walking toward each other and barking at each other to tell the other dog to go away. And the two owners are just walking toward each other. And so the dogs are like, it's not working. I want you to go away. So boredom, confusion, all kinds of reasons for barking. And then I wonder if you would, while you're watching this video, will you guys just put in the chat why it bothers you when your dog is barking? Just throw it in the chat and we'll watch this little video, see if it sounds familiar.
Pongo, quiet boy. You want to stir up the whole neighborhood? Come on, Pongo.
Pretty, come on.
Let's go. Oh, Pongo, you old idiot. Come on now, we're going home.
Sorry, I'm just looking at the chat, but I know it's going to distract me because I'm so interested in what everyone's saying. So I'm just going to get rid of it. I think this is really interesting because, I've been on the other end of that leash. My dog is reactive. I've worked with her for a long time, so she's hardly reactive anymore, but it never really goes away. And the thing that I think is so interesting about this little video is Pongo, the dog, he's saying something. In this case, it happens to be, he's telling all the other neighborhood dogs that Cruella de Vil has stolen all the little Dalmatian puppies, but his owner just wants him to be quiet. And I like where he calls him, you old idiot. I suppose some of us have said that to our dogs when we're frustrated. But I think some of the main reasons I think barking bothers us, of course, we worry about our neighbors, especially if we live in an apartment. We worry about the noise. We worry about the neighbors are going to complain. We also feel like it's frustrating that we can't control it. And I think there's another element that's very typical in our society, which is that we put such a premium on obedience and like making our dogs obey and having dogs who are good and well-mannered. And I think that we're embarrassed, when our dogs bark and we can't make them stop and everyone's looking at us and they think we can't control our dogs. They think our dogs are aggressive. They think they're disobedient. So I think that's something that we can all kind of reframe and help ourselves and other people feel better about it. So before we go into what to do, let's talk about what not to do. Let's not punish barking. That I could just end there. It's just not misbehaving. It's not misbehaving. They bark, dogs bark. That's just a thing. It's not like, can you imagine being a monk in a monastery and like taking a vow of silence? It's not possible to get dogs to stop barking. It's just what they do. And it's not wrong. They're not being bad. They're not trying to dominate you. They're not being insubordinate. So this is just a cute example. I have this meme with this silly little pug that says, he barks at strangers, strange noises to protect you. And he gets told to shut up. So when we think about the ways to make our dogs stop barking, which is, I'm using air quotes. I hope I'm not looking at myself because it's distracting. So I hope you see me using air quotes. You can't make your dog stop, but boy, we'll try. And we'll try anything we can think of in our frustration. And we'll yell, I see in my neighborhood all the time, people holding their dog's mouth shut, saying, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it. Some people go a step further and put a shock collar on their dog, or they have a prong or choke collar so they can correct them. But correcting them it doesn't really make sense because they haven't made a mistake. They're doing a natural behavior. The only reason these things work to the extent that they do is because they cause pain or discomfort, distress. They intimidate and they suppress behavior, but they don't address the reason why the dog is barking in the first place. And I feel it's on us to figure that out and figure out a better way to do something about it. We add stress to the situation when we use aversives. I shouldn't say we, because nobody in this webinar is using aversives, I'm sure. Those people who resort to aversives because they don't know what else can work, are actually working to their own detriment because they're adding stress to an already stressful situation. So a dog is thinking, I'm already upset, that's why I'm barking. And now I'm also being harmed or scared. And then think about if your dog barks at other dogs and they get aversive treatment when they bark, then every time in the future that they see a dog, they're thinking, not only do I dread seeing that dog, I also dread what's going to happen to me. And this isn't just my opinion. I just wanted to include this excerpt from a position statement from the American Veterinary Society of Animal Behavior, which says they caution dog owners to avoid any use of training tools that involve pain, intimidation, and so on. And they say the consequences and fallout from aversive training methods have been proven and are well documented. And they include increased anxiety and can even lead to fear-related aggression and so on. So, okay, so those things are off the table. So what do we do instead? There are a lot of ways. I will tell you right here, spoiler alert, you can't stop your dog from barking. If only we had that kind of on-off switch or the mute button that everyone wants. I mean, I'd like to mute a lot of people, not just dogs, but we also can't do that. So with the way we address barking really depends on what type of barking it is. And there is a lot of overlap here, but just bear with me while I introduce these two types of barking that I think are in many ways they can be quite distinct from each other. And whichever type of barking you're encountering is going to shape how you address it. So I like to think of barking as being intentional or automatic. And again, I'm going to say there is some crossover, but I'm going to show you some video to demonstrate what I'm talking about. Intentional barking is barking on purpose. I'm a dog. I want to get something or say something, and I have a specific way of saying it. Maybe I want attention. Maybe I want a dog to play with me. Maybe my dog barks when, she gets herself stuck in the bathroom, or her ball rolled over under the desk and she can't get it. She'll bark, and I know that means I need help. Human, bring your opposable thumbs and come to my rescue. But the point about this barking is that it is a choice. It's a decision that a dog makes. I am going to bark in order to get something that I need or that I want. And therefore, because they're choosing to do it, we can get in there with a training intervention and teach them to do it to get what they need in a different way. So we can train an alternative behavior. But I just wanted to I want you to watch this video to see. I'll just set it up for you. There's a kind of pointer type dog who really wants a husky to play with him. And the husky is just not having it. And the dog tries every possible way. And eventually, because it doesn't work, he gives up. He shakes off and stops. So I want you to just kind of think about, what is this dog learning about barking? The function of the barking is getting this dog to play with him, but it doesn't work. So he stops. If it worked, he would keep doing it. Oh no, that's not what I meant. Wait a minute. Okay. So right at the park, these dogs clearly know each other. First it's aggressive, but it isn't. It's like, come on. Yay. The husky's just like, no. See it? Focus. One last try. Didn't work. Shake it off and he goes away. It's like, I'll play with somebody else. Now contrast that with this. Is this, and I want you to ask yourself the question, are these dogs choosing to bark, or are they just having an irrational emotional outburst? And I'll set this up for you too. What it is two dogs on opposite sides of a gate. When the gate closes, they commence barking. When the gate opens, they do something very different, and back and forth, then back and forth. So they're not comfortable in it. As the gate closes, it's ferocious barking. Somebody's clearly messing with them, opening and closing the gate to see what they'll do. But like, interesting, huh? They're uncomfortable. You see the dog flicking its tongue, the stiff wagging. But as soon as the door closes, they're barking again. It's almost like they don't even know why they're doing it, because they've already seen the other dog. So they're not thinking, they're just reacting. It's just an eruption of emotion. So that's what I want you to think about when in certain circumstances, your dog is barking because they're just having a feeling, a big feeling. It's not a choice. It's just saying, I feel a big feeling. So, and I think we can understand that because we do it too. In fact, when we yell at our dogs for barking, we're barking too, right? That's sort of a way of automatic barking. It's like, oh, I couldn't control myself. So emotions, they're hard to control. Have you ever lost your temper? I have a lot. Cried in public, guilty, even though I didn't want to. Have you ever laughed inappropriately, like in church? Have you ever screamed at something, even though you felt embarrassed afterwards, like a spider? These are not things that we can easily control. And it's the same for our dogs. If someone says, calm down to you when you're upset, how well does that work? It doesn't work, right? It's just like, you can't tell someone to just stop the feeling, but you can help them feel better. And to illustrate this, we have Cher and Nicolas Cage in the classic old movie, Moonstruck.
I'm in love with you.
Snap out of it.
I can't.
If only, right? So, all right. So let's get started with this section, which I hope will be helpful. It's not a training class, right? We're not in a classroom. I can't really demonstrate. So I'm hoping that I can cover some of the main types of barking that you guys are experiencing with your dogs and help in a general way and give you some things to explore and experiment with. But also this is the section where we're going to make it a little bit more interactive, if we can make that work. so that if something isn't clear, something's not making sense about what I've said, you can just chime in through the chat and ask for clarification or for a little bit extra information. If you have a question about your own specific dog, we can get to those in the Q&A afterwards. So these are the main types of barking that I'm going to try to give you some advice about. A lot of dogs bark at other dogs on walks. A lot of dogs do something that we sometimes call demand barking or frustration barking. And then a lot of dogs bark a lot at home. And if you're there, there are certain ways that you can mitigate it. If you're not home, then there's a little more investigating we need to do to figure out what to do about it. And here's where I was supposed to have a cute little image and I forgot. So, but the point here is, it used to be that a lot of, and they still do, people call barking at other dogs on walks leash aggression. And I always prickle when I hear the word aggression, because to me, aggression means it's a behavior that has an intent to harm. And most dogs, when they're barking, are not barking because given the chance they would come and, rip another dog to shreds. It's almost never that. It can be, I won't lie. I work in a shelter. I have seen real aggression. I've seen dogs fight. There are times when we know that a dog, it has leash reactivity. It looks pretty intense. We don't know if they would fight if they had the access. But we also have seen dogs be very leash reactive, but then play beautifully with another dog. So you can't diagnose aggression just from watching dogs bark on leash. We don't know what they mean. We may find they're frustrated. Hello. They want to get closer to the other dog or to whatever it is, but they're on a leash, so they can't. So they're frustrated, so they bark about it. It's like, eh. And then they may be afraid. They may be anxious. They may be telling the other dog, you are too close to me. I would like you to move away from me. And yet the dog is walking toward them and continues to walk toward them because they're on a walk. And the owner doesn't know that that's what they mean, that they want to move farther away. So there's barking. And because we can't just snap them out of it, we can't just tell them to stop feeling. We need to first change the emotion that they're having. And I'm going to tell you something that's going to surprise you. Instead of punishing the barking or trying to get a dog to do something polite, like sit or give eye contact, we're just going to interrupt it. We're just going to interrupt the barking and we're going to redirect it. And the way we do it is with food. And what I do in the very beginning of training a dog to be less freaked out in the presence of another dog when they're on a leash is I take a fistful of treats, chicken, meatballs, hot dogs, whatever the dog loves, because it's going to have to be something really, really good to cause them to refocus on the treats instead of on the thing they're barking at. So you put the treats right on their nose and then you drop them on the ground. And what that does is it immediately, as long as your treats are good enough and your dog isn't so over threshold that they just can't function, they will look down, put their nose in the grass and start to methodically sniff out and gobble up all those treats. And the reason this works is because it switches a dog from, and maybe this word switch is the wrong word because I just said there's no off switch, but it transfers them. They transition from the part of the brain that's all about, emotion, into the part of the brain that's in charge of thinking, focusing, paying attention, making good choices, remembering the things they've learned before. And looking for treats on the ground is so much fun that a lot of dogs, and I want to say most dogs will just decide that that is more interesting and fun and rewarding than barking. I call it the piñata game because to me, it's got the effect of a piñata breaking open and spilling candy on the ground. And then all the kids are like trying to get the candy. And it's just like, that's their sole focus. And that's how it works with dogs. And I just want to reiterate this idea that I can only ask my dog to do something like sit or pay attention when they are in their thinking brain. We know this. If we're panicking, we can't think straight, right? I was in a car accident once and I had to fill out paperwork. I wasn't hurt. It was a very minor, it totaled my car, but I was fine. My daughter was fine. The cops came, they gave me a stack of paperwork, but I was so amped up just from adrenaline and cortisol coursing through my system. I couldn't fill out the paperwork. It was like, what's your name? I don't know. What's your phone number? I don't know. I couldn't focus. And I had just, kind of take deep breaths and just bring it down a notch and then get back in my thinking brain so that I could focus and do these things. So when a dog is in their thinking brain, they can make these good choices. They can learn. When I see a dog, I get to play the piñata game. And that is something that is really fun and exciting and makes me feel good instead of, oh my God, every time I see a dog, I already feel uncomfortable. And then my person does something mean to me, like yell at me and tell me I'm an old idiot, like a Pongo's owner or worse. But when a dog is in that reacting brain and they're too emotional, they can't think straight. They can't, even if they have a rock solid sit, they will not be able to access the part of their brain that knows how to do things. They're in fight or flight. They're just going on emotion. So,
Karen, there are two questions about find it and treats to refocus the dog.
yeah.
One is, what if your dog isn't food motivated? And the other is, what if you have a small dog who shouldn't have too many treats?
Yeah. So for the first question about my dog isn't food motivated, every dog, I know you've probably heard this before, every dog is food motivated, otherwise they would starve to death. The possibilities are that your dog is too stressed on a walk to eat, or you haven't found the thing that they can't resist. So if your dog won't eat milk bones or, Charlie Bears or Zooks or all the things that, or anything, any of the commercial or manufactured dog treats, or if you've got just kind of boring stuff, maybe they won't be motivated enough to break off their focus and eat the treats. But almost every dog has something that they can't resist. And I had a dog who wouldn't eat on walks, and I finally found liverwurst and Spam and chicken flavored baby food were things that he would eat no matter what. But you may have to try a lot of different things, bacon, meatballs. And the fatty stuff, maybe that's going to be your dog's favorite thing. There are less, there are leaner options if your dog likes turkey breast or chicken, but the main thing is you're front loading this training. You're front loading the treats in the beginning. You're not always going to be dropping 5 pounds of meatballs on the ground for your dog to redirect their attention. They're going to learn. They're going to learn very quickly that this game is what happens when they see another dog. And then you get to a point where you're only giving a few treats, or maybe with my dog, she doesn't react very often. If she does, she looks at me because she's used to playing the game. She looks at me, I toss one treat, I toss it as far away as I can, still within range that I know she'll be able to find it. And then she takes her sweet time, like sniffing everywhere, looking for it, finding it, feeling very satisfied with herself. And by that time, that dog is long gone. For a small dog that shouldn't have too many treats, again, you're front loading this. So take some to reduce their regular food, reduce the amount of regular food you're feeding, and also cut whatever you're using up into very little tiny pieces. And part of why it works is because it's food, but part of why it works is because it's really fun. It is like the kids with the piñata, and dogs get excited to search because that's what they're bred to do. I mean, not bred, that's what they're born to do. Dogs, yes, they are predators, but they're really scavengers. First and foremost, they're scavengers. This is what they would do all day long if they weren't living in your house. They'd be out, moseying around, looking for stuff on the ground or sniffing around, looking for stuff to eat and trying to eat it before somebody else gets it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there are a lot of good ideas in chat too that they're giving each other. Another concern, if you don't want your dog to be looking or picking up things from the ground, what could you substitute for throwing food? Could you use toys or something?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, if you have a dog that loves toys, it's just often when a dog is stressed, they're not going to play. And stress can mean even if they're, they may not necessarily be afraid of another dog, but they may just be frustrated. Like, I want to go there and I can't, but it's still stress. It's still an emotion. And a lot of dogs are not going to play in that situation. I happen to think that when I drop treats on the ground, it's a cue. I'm like setting up a situation where my dog understands that I am about to drop treats on the ground. And in this instance, her job is to stop whatever she's doing and look for the treats on the ground. Because I'm the one.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just can say, I'm the one who dropped them. Yeah, I'll tell you, my dog is still going to look for things on the ground. That's just what she does. And with that, you need to work on a little bit different skills, like get your dog really, 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 really good at paying attention when you say their name, so that in practice all the time, everywhere, every room in your house, everywhere you walk, all the time, name. I say Huckleberry. My dog looks at me like, well, Huckleberry. Yep, there we go. Hi. I have worked with her so much on her name that no matter what is happening, I can always get her to look at me. So, and then the onus is on us to know, like, is there something on the ground that she shouldn't eat? I mean, every dog seems to find chicken bones from the workers at the house next door in the bushes. But I don't believe that this encourages dogs to look more on the ground for food, because you are the one who's setting up the scenario. So does that make sense?
You can teach leave it.
Yeah, you can, but you better be prepared to work on that for a very long time. Because we used to teach leave it in the advanced classes I taught at the place I used to work. And, what people do is they say leave it, but they're also yanking on the leash. And leaving really is a voluntary behavior, but it's really hard because it's one of those behaviors that goes against every fiber of a dog's being, right? So you better not rely on leave it.
Or it ought to be trained really well.
Yeah.
So when you need it.
I can do it with my dog because she chases my rabbit, and I have a house rabbit that just runs around. And so I can stop her in her tracks, but that's because I have prioritized that behavior so much. Otherwise, and I let other things go. Like she barks at the door. Oh, I didn't say that.
Another question has to do with walking two dogs and the displaced behavior where, they're not paying attention to whatever you throw on the ground because they have now turned on each other.
Yeah.
And they can't get to.
This relates to that, but I also should have said, if your dog won't take food outside, even if you have something that they love, you are too close. There's a distance threshold behind which a dog can kind of like cope and function, and beyond which they're just like, I can't eat, I can't think, I can't do anything but bark. And so you have to kind of, through trial and error, and it's fluid, it changes depending on the circumstances, but you have to find that place, that distance where your dog can work, can eat. And if it works sometimes and it doesn't work other times, it's not working when it's too intense or too close. So that's another thing to factor in. If you're walking two dogs and they're both reactive, yeah, you got to catch them before they start. If you have dogs that resource guard from each other, then this is not going to be your best method, although you can take two handfuls and toss them in opposite directions. We do that at the shelter sometimes when we've got dogs that are together that we need to separate, but we know they might squabble with each other over the food. But you have to kind of get better at it. And, you know, if you're working on reactivity, unfortunately, it probably makes more sense, although it's harder. It makes more sense to work with the dogs individually until they have more skills.
And what about dogs in cars? When they're in the car and they bark at everything outside of the car?
We'll get to that in a little bit. Right now, yeah, this is really specifically about on a walk when your dog encounters other dogs. But I'm going to get to something like that. It's similar to if they're in the house barking. It depends on whether you're there or not. So, but we'll get to that. Is there anything else right now?
Right now. Move on, and
Okay.
because there's a lot, people are putting a lot in chat and going long. So keep going for now. I'll keep reading them.
Okay. I don't let myself look because I get all absorbed and then I'm distracted and I forget that I'm supposed to be presenting. So I'm surprised actually that no one asked this question, or maybe they did, but people often say, if I use treats when my dog is barking, and I'm saying you want to use these treats, whether you're like, no matter what is going on, ideally you catch your dog just as they see the other dog, but before they have started reacting. But even if they start barking, you're still going to do this. You're still going to do it. And then people say, well, aren't I reinforcing the bad behavior? Aren't I rewarding it? And I'm going to say no. And the reason why is because that barking is not a choice. Okay. If your dog chooses to do something and you don't like it, then you don't reward it. Right. And if by the same token, if they do something that you like, if you asked them to sit or they sat on their own, for example, you reward it. You don't always reward it with food. Let's just say, like, you don't always necessarily have to reward every single thing with food. In certain circumstances, you can reward with attention. You can reward with play. You can reward with whatever they find rewarding. But when you are dealing with automatic behavior, you cannot make it stronger because it's an emotion. It's an emotional reaction. So like if you're sad, you're crying, you're sobbing, you're distraught, someone comforts you. Does that make you feel more sad? No, it makes you feel better, right? Or depending on who it is and how they try to comfort you. But in general, comforting someone will help them feel better. You're worrying about something, like I was worrying about this webinar. I was telling my son, I don't know, I'm not ready. And he was like, you'll be fine. You have a lot of time. So that made me worry less because he was able to reassure me and it didn't make me worry more. So if there's an uncomfortable feeling and you do something to make that feeling less uncomfortable, you are not then going to cause the dog or the person to feel worse. You're going to cause them to feel better. And once you have cut off that reaction and changed their emotion and gotten them back into thinking mode so they can focus, then they can start doing intentional behaviors. Like if you ask them to sit, they can sit. If you say their name, they can pay attention. But while that emotion is happening, you just want it to stop. This is an example of a dog we worked with in the shelter, and I'll just let you watch it. Let's see. It's not on YouTube, it's just on my own. So it's a little awkward. So we're in the yard. There's another dog. Look at later. Oh, treats?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's go back to barking, but not as long.
Yeah, I know. Look at you. Let's just stop and kind of look like a little bit. Hi. Ew, I don't know.
Now I'm going to explore. Okay. So in that example, I feel like let's see, no, we're still in presentation mode. So in that example, that was a dog. I think from the body language the dog was showing that the dog wasn't like aggressive or afraid. The dog was interested and excited and a little frustrated because of the fence, but it's still an emotion, right? It was an emotion, just a kind of an outburst of barking. And very quickly the dog was like, oh, treats. And then the arousal came down, and then she was able to approach the fence and sniff calmly and give the kind of body language to the other dog that would invite them to come over instead of this freak out, frantic, crazy stuff. So I'm going to stop there on leash reactivity. But if there are lingering questions, of course, this is a process. This is something that people work on for a long time. Reactivity never really goes away, but you can often just turn it into like, oh yeah, there's a dog. And then your dog will maybe feel some like upwelling of feeling, but then they're not over threshold. They're able to behave intentionally. They anticipate that a find it game is about to start, and they will usually get to a point, if you're consistent, where they will see a dog and turn back to you and wait for the game to start. So before I go into
what if you are on a trail, a tight trail, there's somebody coming towards you. What if you are startled last minute? Something comes from around the corner, or a jogger or a bike, or
yeah, it happens, right? First, I want to say, I think part of what bothers us about reactive barking is we set unreasonable expectations for ourselves. I know when I was training my dog, I was a new trainer, and I took it so personally if she barked at another dog. These things happen, I think. And, my goal was like, I never want my dog to bark at another dog. And if she does, I have failed. And, these days I just think like, it's just barking. It's just, well, I was going to say it's just noise. It's not just noise. Of course, I said that in the beginning, but it's not the end of the world. So, but you don't want your dog to be unduly stressed by the unpredictability of life, because that can, of course, make, for an anxious dog, it can make things worse. So if you're surprised, there is also, and I almost included it at the last minute, I took it out, but there's a really good tutorial on how to teach your dog a U-turn. And that's just a quick change of direction. And you can start teaching it by luring it, just have a piece of food in your hand, stick it on your dog's nose, and you can just kind of have them follow it and follow you in the opposite direction. And it's something, again, you have to practice it so that it's a really fluent behavior before you try to pull it out in a crisis. But if you've worked on it enough, and the other thing is always have treats, always have treats, and always be ready with them. When we have dogs who are vigilant, which is frankly most of them, but when our dogs are vigilant, we have to be even more vigilant. We have to try to see these things coming or anticipate that something may happen. And so I always have a handful ready to go. So be prepared. And then you can use your U-turn cue, your U-turn behavior to just, zip, get out of Dodge, or you can just take those treats. And then, we don't like to pull on our dogs because that puts more tension into the situation. But honestly, if you really need to get your dog away quickly, just pull and then run and make it fun. Oh, look, we're running away from, we don't need to make it like, oh my God, I'm panicking. We have to both run away together because we're both panicking. Just make it like a fun game and run away.
A few people want to know if there should be a cue of some sort when you throw the treats.
I do use a cue. I say find it. And you can, generally with behaviors that, when we start out teaching a behavior, I don't like to put a word to it usually until the behavior is really like where I want it to be. Because if I just use the word like, down, and my dog is like not really, not really all the way down, then I'm not labeling the behavior that I actually want in the end, which is just an aside. But for find it, it's really easy for dogs to make that connection. Like I hear the word find it and treats fall on the ground. They don't really have to do anything except eat them. So I do like to use a cue, and you can make the cue whatever you want. But when you say find it, then that's telling your dog, oh boy, we're going to play the piñata game. Get ready. There's going to be food on the ground. And then as they search for it, if they think they're done, but you can see there's still more food, you can just say, find it again. And then they know there's more food to find. So I do like to use a cue. That's a good question.
There are a lot of questions in chat, but there's no way you can address all of them. So,
try to get through them to this. Sorry, I'm sitting on a lazy boy. That's why I'm rocking. It's not the best setup, but do you want to keep going and then save some of those questions for either later in the presentation or in the Q&A?
I think we better. The one thing I want to make clear, and you said it, but I'm not sure from chat if everyone got it. You don't need to pull at your dog. You can turn around, run, make it fun, just like Karen said.
Mm-hmm.
And you also don't need to wait there for something to get close to you and then throw the treats. If you can avoid the situation, that is number one.
Yes, absolutely.
If you get stuck. So that was something else people were getting confused about.
Yeah.
Well, how close does the other dog have to be before I throw the treats?
Yeah, I think that actually, I'm glad to clarify that. There's, so we talked about this threshold. The moment your dog sees the dog, that's when you drop the treats. The moment they see the dog, even if they've started barking, you still do it. It's not like, you blew it, now you get nothing, because that's just adding frustration to everything. So the moment your dog sees the other dog, ideally, before they've started to react. And then the other thing is, I just lost my train of thought. But a third thing is, you can use the direction of the treats to influence where the dog's attention goes. So suppose I see a dog coming toward my dog and me from maybe, well, if it's on the same side of the street, I'm just going to cross the street. But if it's coming toward me, then I'm going to take my treats and I'm going to toss them away from where the other dog is. Also, I'm going to toss a whole handful. And if my dog finishes the handful of treats that I've tossed and that dog is still near or coming nearer, I'm going to throw some more. So be prepared. And this is like what I'm saying is in the beginning of this kind of training, you're going to use as many treats as you need to change the emotion and to change the behavior. So, and I'm trying to think what, The question made me think of some other thing, but it'll come to me later. So did I miss anything? Because I feel there's something hanging in my brain that's like, it was like prompted by that question that I can't access it. Is there anything else?
Let's go ahead and move on so we can get through everything.
Yeah. Okay. So next I want to talk about demand barking. So I was thinking how reactivity is this automatic, it's that type of automatic barking. It's just this like eruption. It's like a blurt. Demand barking is very different from that, right? Demand barking is like very intentional. A dog wants something. They're trying to figure out how to get it. They bark. If barking works, they're going to keep doing it. They'll do it the next time and the next time and the next time. And the problem is if we have a dog who is doing a lot of demand barking, it is because we have rewarded it, even without meaning to. Because if it doesn't work, they'll just try something else. But if it works, that's what they'll keep doing. So if a dog wants something, they bark. Maybe they want food, and finally we just can't stand it anymore. And we just, here, have the food. Or they want to play and they won't leave you alone. And finally or it can even be as subtle as, I'm bored. I want you to pay attention to me. And you look over at them. That can be enough for some dogs to reinforce the barking. Oh, she looked. Let me keep barking. Maybe I can get more. So they learn barking works. How do they learn? We teach them. Oops, we didn't mean to, but we did. That's why we have a dog who barks at us for stuff. That's the magic. That's positive reinforcement. That's how it works. That's how it works against us, but we can also make it work for us. Okay. But I want to show you this example of this dog. See if you can guess what this dog wants. Oh, look at that sad face. It's like, you have an ice cream sandwich. Why can't I have an ice cream sandwich? So there are various ways that people deal with this problem or try. Ignoring is a viable option, but you've got to be steadfast, right? You've got to ignore it like when it just starts getting to be a thing rather than, when they're already barking habitually. Ignoring is probably not going to work. So if possible, you know what they want. Don't give it to them when they're barking. Wait for them to stop, wait a beat, and then reward the quiet. However, a dog can very easily learn that they can bark to get your attention. And then if they sit very politely, they get a treat. So be very careful about how you reward the quiet. I am going to play this video, but I don't love this method. It shows a way of ignoring a dog until the dog stops barking. But I don't like how the dog is like, I don't understand. I bark because I've learned that this works. I have been reinforced for this before by people who maybe didn't know that they were rewarding me, but still I bark, I get attention. What the heck is going on here? And the dog is very stressy and it just like, it makes me uncomfortable. I don't think you need to stress a dog out to teach them a lesson, but let's see what we're. Why are these people turning their backs to me? I don't understand. What do they want me to do? Oh, maybe I'll go around. Oh, they did it again to me. Why? I don't understand. And then the dog sits, but they're not looking, so they're not able to capture the sit. And then the dog is quiet.
See? Yes. See? Yes.
And I don't know what they're also saying yes, they're marking a behavior. I don't know what they're marking because the dog is jumping up and they're saying yes, and I don't know. But so anyway, this is not my favorite video, but I think it does show you the intention is like, oh, when the dog stops barking, that's when we give attention and praise and food and whatever. You can pull this off, but it's going to have to be like when the behavior is still really mild and hasn't gotten too ingrained. And if you are going to ignore, you can't give in. So this is like the, let them cry it out method of teaching a baby to sleep through the night. And it sounds really harsh, but the instructions are, I use Dr. Ferber says, you can't go in there. You can't finally go in to comfort the crying baby, because then they learn, oh, I see how it is. I just need to keep crying and eventually someone will come. And I'm not like making a value judgment about Ferberizing your baby. I'm just saying it's similar in that if you are going to ignore your dog, you have to be ready to ignore them until they stop. And if you inadvertently reinforce them for barking, even just by giving them like a sidelong glance, you may be teaching them that all they have to do is keep barking. And they're going to say, like, I could do this all day. I don't have anything else pressing. I'm a dog. I can bark till the cows come home. Stop. Okay. I think a better way to sort of cut them off at the pass or nip it in the bud is to anticipate and preempt demand barking. So if you know that your dog is, well, let's say this. We tend to notice most when our dogs are doing something that we don't like. And sometimes they've been doing things that we do like, being quiet, lying calmly, sitting patiently, just generally not making a ruckus. And we don't notice it. And so what I think is that we should really make it a priority to notice it. Notice when your dog is being quiet and calm and peaceful and not, pestering you, if you want to put it that way. Because then you've got lots of opportunities throughout the day to give your dog some reinforcement for behavior that you want to strengthen, right? If your dog is just lying, relaxing, and you go over and praise them or pet them or, drop a treat, you're reinforcing calm behavior. You're going to get more and more and more of it. Also, you're just enriching your dog's life more. If you give them more rewards and reinforcement for just the kind of common everyday things that they do all day that, that are just settled and calm behaviors, then you are probably going to have a dog who has less of a need to like demand it because they're getting it on a more regular basis. The other thing is about anticipating and preempting is like, and I should have done this and I didn't because I have my dog, my husband has left. He's taking my son to wrestling practice. So I have no one else in the house with me except my dog and my 3 cats and my guinea pig and my rabbit. But if my dog decides that she is bored or that she, lost her ball and needs me to find it or whatever, she's going to come, interact with me. And what I should have done is I should have given her something like a bully stick or a frozen Kong or something to work on so that she would be occupied and wouldn't need anything from me. So if you have a dog who demand barks when you're cooking, when you're eating dinner, when you're working, and you really just need them to not get in your business, give them something to do that will occupy them for a long time. And then that it also reinforces they're doing something, they're they're stimulated, but I always recommend these calm, like lie on a mat and lick your Kong or gnaw your rod. They're very settled, calm behaviors. And as your dog is chewing and licking and eating, they're also getting reinforced for lying down. So it just is kind of a positive feedback loop. I get a Kong, I lie down, I feel calm, I have delicious food, I feel calm, I like to lie down. And so you can really build calm behavior that way. You can even feed your dog all their meals from a Kong, canned dog food mixed with, yogurt, pumpkin, whatever they like. But anyway, the point is not to wait until your dog is up in your face saying, "Give me your ice cream sandwich." You can kind of you can give them more reinforcement throughout the day, or prevent that frustration from mounting. The other thing is, sometimes it's really confusing for our dogs. We, in the beginning of training, we do a lot of like sit, treat, sit, treat, give me eye contact. Oh, treat, sit and give me eye contact. Oh, that's good, treat. But sometimes when it's not in that context, like if my dog comes over and sits and looks at me, then I call, and I'm eating, then I call that begging. Okay, yeah, I mean, because she wants my food. But so often in the past, she has sat and given me eye contact, and I've said, a good girl, and I've given her a treat. So it can be kind of confusing for dogs to know, like, why did this work in this situation, but not that situation? So if your dog feels like they're doing the thing that is good, that gets them the thing that they want, and they're not getting it, they're like, geez, what gives around here? So I like to teach dogs to ask nicely by sitting to say please, like making a very deliberate, like if I have something that my dog wants, I want her to come over to me. Well, here's an example. My dog wants to cross the street to go sniff somebody's trash or whatever it is. And I don't really want to cross the street, but she really wants to cross the street. So in order to prevent her from getting frustrated, if I am willing to let her cross the street, then I will wait for her to sit or even to lie down. And once she's done that for me, that counts as please. That counts as asking nicely. And then I let her. And that she's incorporated that into lots of different contexts, where if she really wants something, she'll lie down instead of barking. And it's beautiful. So it's something that you want to really work on, like reward it all the time as much as you can in all different contexts. But it does teach a dog, oh, this is how I get something. I do this polite thing, and then I get the thing, or sometimes I get the thing that I want. So that's all I'm going to say right now about demand barking. But if there are questions about any of that, we can go through them now.
Okay, what if your dog demand barks at another dog?
Yeah. Well, I've got all these things running through my head. So if it's, I have a tendency to a certain degree, let dogs kind of talk it out among themselves. If it starts to ratchet up in intensity, then I would like to remove the dogs from each other's company by calling them and, giving them, like rewarding them for coming to me and leaving the other dog alone. If I have to go and put a leash on and take them away and maybe lure them with food, if I have to do that, I'm going to do that, because I don't want things to get out of hand. But in a lot of cases, like you saw it with the video in the dog park, that dog was barking. Yeah, I mean, it was demand barking at the other dog. But eventually the other dog was like, look, I'm not going to play with you. And so the first dog was like, oh, okay. So it's not going to work. So in that case, the other dog's behavior is going to determine whether your dog keeps barking. Because if it doesn't work, then they're going to eventually do something else. Now, if they get frustrated, then, they may start doing other things that are not desirable. So I would say I wouldn't let the demand barking go on and on and on and on, because you're going to have emotion ratcheting up and, lose focus, and you're going to have just emotional dogs, and you don't really necessarily want that. But I would let it play out a little bit and just see what the other dog tells your dog. Because there's so much subtle communication going on between dogs. I don't pretend to know the half of it, but, so I would say either let it go a little bit, see what the other dog does, see if the other dog will tell your dog to just, go jump in a lake, or it will eventually work and they'll play or whatever. Or if you see it like just starting to just get too much, then remove your dog from the situation. But you don't need to scold or punish. It's a natural behavior. You just need it to stop. And so you do whatever you need to do, call your dog away or lure them with a treat, whatever it is you can do to just gently, calmly remove them from the situation so they can get their act together.
Someone else wants you to explain more about rewarding the quiet.
Yeah. I'm not sure which specific aspect to address. What do you think, Deborah? What do you think needs to be?
Probably, I mean, every time your dog is quiet, I mean, how often would you reward them?
Yeah.
Is it after they're barking and then they're quiet for a second, but then what if they go back to barking?
Yeah. I think when we're living on that razor's edge of intentional and automatic, that can be a really challenging training conundrum, because when we wait for that moment of quiet, then we're kind of counting on our dogs to realize, oh, I stopped barking. That's why I'm getting the reward. When they go back to barking, it's because, and it's kind of like the dog in the video who was barking at the other dog and then got a treat and then went back to barking, but it was less, and then noticed the treat again. So I'm trying to think how to explain it without being able to show it. My feeling is, for the average person, unless you are a person who's very interested in training and is willing to invest the amount of time it's going to take to incrementally reduce barking. My dog used to bark at squirrels out the window, and it was like all day long. And I just didn't have the patience, even as a trainer, to sit there and like wait for the moment she stopped barking and click and treat, because she was still so riled up by the squirrels that it wasn't penetrating, so I think you have to work in a lower intensity situation. If your dog is really just can't really control their own barking and you can't get them to kind of refocus, then they're over threshold and you just probably want to remove them or get them farther away from the situation. I think we maybe can recommend a good YouTube tutorial or something about barking for quiet, but it really is that difference between conscious control of barking and just kind of out of control barking. And if the stimulus is too strong and the dog can't come down and get themselves back in their thinking brain, if they can get themselves back in their thinking brain, then you can take advantage. So if you're clicking for, or, you're rewarding quiet, I would drop a treat on the ground so that, you kind of break off the visual. And then if you see the barking start to diminish in that current situation, then your dog is enough in learning mode to realize, if I'm quiet, I get rewarded. But I don't think it's ever going to really stop them from starting to bark, but you can interrupt them that way. I don't know if that makes sense. I wish I could teach, like in a classroom, but.
It's a situation where you know that your dog always barks. Couldn't you catch them before, click, for example, before they start and reward it?
Yeah. You certainly could. That's just capturing quiet. Yeah.
Someone wants to know, and a few people have asked similar questions. What if you can't tell demand barking from alert barking, from fear barking, or fear barking from I want to play barking?
That's a big
answering that.
You
just have to know your own dog.
I think it comes with learning your dog's personality. And I think if you just sort of distinguish between the kind of barking that is on purpose, like And so here's an example. When I've seen dogs who have learned, maybe their reactivity wasn't super intense to begin with, and they've really caught on to the find it game, but they know from the past that barking is what has initiated the pinata game. And I've seen dogs kind of like look at a dog and in a very kind of nonchalant way, kind of go, woof, and then quickly turn to their person and go, okay, let's play the game. And at that point, you kind of know what you're seeing, that's not an outburst of emotion. That's intentional. And then, you can work with that in whatever way you want. You can, capture the moment before they do the bark and reward it. But I think it's just, I think when in doubt, assume that it is emotional and first try to change the dog's emotional state by distracting them and redirecting them, just interrupting the reaction. There is, and like I said in the beginning, there's often crossover. So, and every dog is different. It's every dog's an individual. It's a study of one, and trial and error. There is no one answer for what to do. You have to try different things to see what your dog responds to.
Okay, there are a lot of questions about things like, my dog barks when he wants to go outside and keeps barking until I get my coat on, or when I'm going to feed my dog, he keeps barking. Is that demand barking or excited barking? I mean,
yeah.
You can specifically train these things, but I think people are getting into the weeds. If it doesn't, if your dog barks an extra 3 minutes, doesn't matter.
Yeah. That's, I mean, I've been doing this for about, I don't know, like since 2011, I guess. So a little over 10 years. In the beginning, I was very conscientious and set really high expectations for myself and my dog. And felt like if she didn't kind of comply with something that I thought I had taught her to do, I would feel very frustrated and like, oh, there's got to be a better way. What you're talking about there is it's arousal, excitement, anticipation, and it's like a lack of impulse control. So in those situations, what I do is I try to switch the dog back into their thinking brain. So I might, if a dog is barking while I'm getting my coat, I might start by asking them to sit and giving them a treat, and trying to keep them in this sit while I'm giving them a treat, just to get them back into thinking mode. And if they have learned these kind of nicely settled, controlled behaviors really well, then they will be able to control their impulse and stay in a sit or stay, at least just be quiet. That's another example of where, like, as long as they're not barking, you could drop a treat. But it's kind of like I just have gotten really like permissive and lazy, I guess. But I just feel like a dog who's really excited to go for a walk, I kind of like it. Sorry. I just think it's nice that your dog is excited to go for a walk. But yeah, it is. You can play around with what we call antecedents, like the lead up to going for a walk. Like you might just try switching the order and see if, or go out a different door if you have another door, or, you can do like desensitizing the coat, like put the coat on, take the coat off, put the coat. So it doesn't always mean, but I think probably the easiest thing is to teach your dog. And this is, again, this is for like a training class or a good YouTube tutorial. Kiko Pup is my favorite YouTube tutorial channel. It's a dog training by Kiko Pup. And she's got a video for everything. So what you want is to find general training tips and lessons about teaching your dog impulse control. And there are lots of different ways to build that muscle. And so if you build that muscle up, then your dog becomes more and more able to just like cool it, you know, and hang on and just get it together. So.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay. All right. So the last sections are going to be just about general barking at home. And this is so broad. I know it's going to probably raise more questions than it answers, but let's forge ahead and see what insights we can come up with. So if your dog is barking and you are home, you have a lot of choices about how to address it. You would like to know why. Why are they barking? Sometimes it's obvious, you know, like the mailman comes. Sometimes it's, you know, it could be a lot of things. It's, you know, they're telling you somebody's coming. They're protecting their home. Not every dog is protecting their home, by the way. Not every dog is a guardian. But if you have got a dog with, you know, who's a guardian breed or has that breed tendency in them, they're going to bark a lot when their defenses are breached, you know, when someone is coming into their territory, because they have, you know, centuries and centuries of that kind of that selectivity just like baked into their DNA. So it is very natural for a dog to bark when there's something happening outside, whatever it may be. And so the first strategy I recommend is go see what they're barking at. I mean, if you're in an apartment and you can't see into the hallway, that's a different situation. But if they're barking at a window or if they're barking at a door and there's a window by the door, just go over there. And sometimes you'll see something really interesting, you know, or sometimes you'll see that they're barking at, you know, a neighbor, and you can just sort of reassure them like, oh, you know, I just talked to my dog and say like, oh, you know them. And then she'll kind of look at me like, and she'll just kind of peter out. So sometimes they just want to, I don't know, they want to tell you that something is there. Maybe they want to have a little conversation about it. Do you see it? I see it. What do you think? Should I worry? No, it's fine. So a lot of times you can just kind of like almost like reason with them or just discuss it with them. And, you know, that's like when it's still on the more intentional end and they're still in their thinking brain. If they're out of their minds, that's going to be different. This is the tricky thing about barking at people who come, or dogs, or anyone or anything that comes into your yard. Your dog barks at them. I'm going to read this quote and then you'll see what I'm talking about. No, it's not a quote. It's like it's some meme. The dog says, "Of course, I believe in the power of barking. The only reason I am alive today is because of barking. Every day a mailman approaches my home, and every day I bark until he leaves. To this day, he still has not brutally murdered my entire family." So if you think about, why is the mailman leaving? Is it because the dog is barking? No, it's because he delivered the mail and he's got more mail to deliver. But in the dog's mind, there's a connection. I bark, it goes away. And that kind of counts for anything, because there's almost nobody, or there's almost no one or no thing that's going to just sit in your yard all day. Eventually the thing is going to leave. If the dog is barking the whole time and the thing eventually leaves, the dog says, I made them go away. So honestly, there are various ways of addressing barking at the door and window, but I feel like a lot of dogs are just sort of standing sentry all day. They have free access to the windows and the doors, and they're just like waiting for something. It's like watching TV or like playing a video game. You know, it's like, I don't know, like, it's just entertainment, and it's something to do, and it becomes habitual. It's exciting. It's interesting. So, and for dogs who have free access to the windows and doors, maybe we want to think about having them hang out at least some of the day somewhere else where they don't have access to the door and they don't have access to the windows. Or you can put up a baby gate or close off a room or put up an X-pen. You can close your blinds or your curtains. You can also, and to mask sound, you can put on a white noise machine. But something else that's interesting, and this can be very temporary, you can stick it on, peel it off, stick it on, peel it off, but it's a film that you can put over your window that just blurs everything out. I mean, yeah, you're going to ruin your view for yourself, I guess, but it doesn't have to be permanent. And let me show you the effectiveness of this. So this is a video made by someone named Eileen Anderson. And this is before window
film. Here's what my dogs used to do many times a day.
So we all know dogs have all kinds of, superpower senses. Like they can smell when something's outside. They can hear when something's outside. But in this case, they're actively watching. So if we blur their view, this is what can happen.
Zany and I go outside and I jump around directly in front of the window.
And you can see her just
I
barely
wave my
at the
arms,
window
then tap,
when she taps that dark spot.
calling the dogs through the window.
Now they know she's there.
I'm still there, but Clara can't tell.
Okay, so that's the power of prevention. There are things you can do to train your dog to bark less, but there's some simple things you can do to just avoid it in the first place. And I am a huge fan of managing the environment to just prevent the things you don't want from happening and only and set it up so that only good things can happen. So, but there are interventions you can make. If your dog is barking at the window or at the door, you can interrupt and redirect. That's kind of the go-to strategy for almost any unwanted behavior. So you can call them away from the door or window, and they can come. With my dog, I recall her straight to the refrigerator, and then I take a tiny piece of food out. I throw it all the way across the house, and I let her search around for it. And by that time, whatever was out at the window is gone. Now, your dog has to have a really good recall, and they're probably not going to be willing, at least at first, to leave their post at the door or window, stop watching this fascinating thing or the scary thing or the thing they need to tell to go away, and rip themselves away and come trotting over. So you probably will need to start from a very close distance, and you might even have to lure. But then if you toss the treat away, then you've got the dog moving and running and excited and it's fun, and they kind of forget what they were barking about. And hopefully the thing that we were barking about is already gone. Like we were talking about before, another aspect is just building impulse control as a habit. It's like why people meditate. I am terrible at meditating. But I should, because I understand that with practice, you can kind of gather your wits about you more effectively. And so there are lots of things you can, just teaching a dog to learn to relax, learn to just sit there while the world goes on around them. Or lots of ways you can find these things on the internet. Dr. Karen Overall's Relaxation Protocol is a favorite. You can desensitize a dog to sounds. You can record the sounds and then play them at very low intensity and give your dog treats. But these are all time consuming. I completely support and encourage anyone who wants to make these efforts. It's just realistically, not all of us have time or the patience, and a lot of times it's easier to just keep these things from happening in the first place. And then a more kind of distant, these are sort of proximal, near term, in the moment fixes. But keep in mind that dogs need exercise. They also need enrichment. They need mental stimulation. They need as many chances as possible to just be a dog. And if their behavioral needs are met in other ways, you're going to see less barking. Or I should say, if their behavioral needs are not being met, like you may find more barking on when the weather's really cold and you don't go for as many walks, or, so just keep in mind the agitation level or the kind of restlessness or, just like hypervigilance of your dog can be affected by how much or how little they're getting these outlets for their natural dog behaviors. So like, if you can't take your dog out to throw a ball and wear them out, or you can't take them on a long walk, you can even just like hide instead of feeding them from a bowl, maybe hide their food around the house. It's just getting some of their mental and physical energy out so that they're not bursting at the seams and barking explosively at everything that moves. And then this is the last thing that I'm going to cover. And this is really vague, and I would apologize, but I think it's because there's so many variables here. And the first thing is when we're not home and our dogs are barking, we can't really intervene. And it's important to know. So I see a neighbor, my dog is probably going to bark. Huck. Yep. She scares the cat. Huckleberry. Hey. So I'm going to go to her. Hey. I was like, I don't have any treats. And then I remembered I have a can of cat food. So there's a neighbor and her dog. And now she just turned back to me to just get more cat food because it's just better. And we've done this a lot. We've practiced a lot. So anyway, so luckily I was here. Now, if she's barking at that dog and I'm not home, I don't know, probably it's better that she doesn't have access to the door or the window, or, I'm lucky that I don't have neighbors right up against me where I live. So it's okay if she barks. It's just that if she's that agitated, I'd rather she weren't agitated all day. So maybe a dog is lonely when they're left alone and that's why they're barking. Maybe they're worried. Maybe they're just hypervigilant. They're always, and some breeds are very hypervigilant just by nature. Their job is to keep an eye on things. And so if you have a dog who's just naturally by artificial selection been bred to be hypervigilant, then it has pros and cons. And one of the cons is they're probably going to be barking a lot at things that are happening in the environment. They might be bored. We don't know. So what I recommend when you have a dog who barks at home and you're not home is just get one of these little Ring cameras or some other camera and just watch them when you get a chance and just see what are the things that set them off. Is it separation anxiety? Or is it, every time somebody walks down the hall? Or is it, what is it? What is it? Is it people walking their dogs past? What are the things that set your dog off? And then you can start to build a strategy to kind of tamp it down. One thing is you can desensitize your dog to certain sounds so that they just mind. And there's a dog running. Huckleberry. Hey. Hey. So she's watching a dog run. There we go. Okay. I also just don't take no for an answer. Like if I can't get her attention back, I'm just going to keep Huck. Hey. There we go. Okay. Oh, now I've got cat food all over me. Nice. And my dog is a hound mix, and hounds are noisy. They have a lot to say about everything that happens around them. And it's part of their charm. And, they're not for everyone, but she's mine and I love her and I accept it. It's part of her nature. So if it's sounds that are bothering your dog, you can leave a TV or radio on, you can play classical music, you can get a white noise machine to muffle the sounds. If it's anxiety, your dog can wear a thunder shirt if that's something that helps them. If they're really having the behavioral, if it's a anxiety problem, if it's not just like noticing other things out the window and reacting to them. But if it's actually like hypervigilance and it's affecting your dog's quality of life, that may be a job for a veterinary behaviorist, or at least a vet who's familiar with behavior. They may benefit from some anti-anxiety medicines. And there are two types. There's generally two categories. There's something they would take every day to just kind of like take the edge off life, or there are situational meds that can be given like when someone leaves in the morning, and you give them when you're leaving, and then that's, they just get it in those circumstances. There are also supplements. Composure is like, it's a chewable. Angstine is also a chewable. These are just things they are not pharmaceutical, but they are they're supplements that do work. And Adaptil is another one. It's a synthetic pheromone. And again, you also want to think about how long is your dog alone, and how much did they get to be a dog before you left, and how much do they get to be a dog after you get back. So those are some ways that, if you could take your dog for a long walk, or, leave them with a Kong or something to do while you're gone, that may help just level them out. So I'm going to stop there. And I was afraid this would be too short, honestly, when I first started, and now it's already 3:35. So I don't know how much time we want to take for questions. I'm here all day. So
here all day. I want to bring up one thing. I'm having an issue with my own dogs, and some of you mentioned something similar. One of my dogs started getting up in the middle of the night and deciding that he needed to go outside. We have a yard, and he would bark, and they'd go out. And because I was tired, I would shake a treat jar to get that one in particular back in. And I started thinking, what is he getting out of barking? So I opened the door in the middle of the night. What he's getting is a treat when he comes back in. So now there are no treats in the middle of the night. And in fact, after the other two come in, which they do quickly, I turn the light off. And now all of a sudden he's showing up at the door to go back to bed. Sometimes if you can figure out what your dog is getting out of barking, it can help.
That's a really good point, because, just remember, fundamentally, dogs do what works. What works. Every behavior has a function. Every behavior that a dog chooses to do has a function, has a purpose. And if what happens after they do that behavior is the thing that they wanted to happen, then why do anything else? They just keep doing the thing that worked, and that becomes their go-to behavior. So if a dog wakes up in the middle of the night and says, I wonder what's happening out in the yard. I mean, I don't have a job. I don't have to sleep through the night. I can get up whenever. In theory, I could get up anytime I want. I wonder if Deborah would let me just go out in the yard and poke around a little. Oh,
get a treat when I get back.
And get a treat when they get back. It's double reinforcement, because it's like, if they're barking to alleviate boredom, then, and to interact with you, the whole thing is very reinforcing. Oh, you're talking to your dog, you let them outside. The outside is very interesting. They get to smell things. They get to, relieve themselves. And then they get to come in and have treats. Why on earth would you stop asking for that? If it works, you keep doing it, right? All I have to do is bark, and I get to do this whole field trip in the middle of the night. I don't care if it's the middle of the night. I don't have anything going on. So there's so many things that we reinforce without realizing.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that case, you would probably want to, that's a case where you probably want to ignore if you can.
We had a student whose dog would bark in the middle of the night, looking out the outside, and she took newspaper and taped it to that window.
Yeah.
Stopped barking. I mean, that was brilliant.
Prevention.
window film.
Yeah, yeah,
Before
DIY.
window film. And she figured out what to do, which was really good. A few people have asked about barking at a specific time of day. Yeah.
Only the dog knows. If you don't know, but your dog knows it, I think something that we sometimes forget is that dogs hear things we don't hear. They smell things we don't smell. There could be just routines that are happening in the world outside that involve other people's routines. Like, they may hear a sort of sound or smell a certain smell at the same time every day. And we don't realize that that's something that's triggering them because our senses are too, kind of like
old,
blunt to pick up. Without having more details, I'm not sure what to say about it. But if you know that it's really the same time every day, then I would just like preempt it, get your dog doing something else if you can, instead of standing there barking.
Have you found any luck with products like Adaptil? Does that calm some dogs enough that they don't have anxious barking?
I'm going to say that I think Adaptil on its own is probably not going to be able to intercept all the stimulation and excitement and arousal and all the emotions. But what it can do is lower a dog's baseline, I would say, so that they start out with a little less, like potential energy. They start out just a little calmer. And so they're not right away, like straight out of the gate, like, oh, what's there? What should I buy? So maybe it's like drinking a cup of chamomile tea or something, like drinking a cup of tea isn't necessarily going to keep you from like getting mad at your kid for like making a mess, but it's going to put you in a frame of mind or like a state that is just starting out to be a little more relaxed and less agitated. So I would say Adaptil works. I actually know of a veterinary behaviorist in our area, Dr. Pike, who says, put an Adaptil collar on your dog for the first year of their life, no matter what they're like, because it just takes the edge off. It helps them meet all the, have encounters with things in the world and just feel a little better about them. I have seen with my own dog and with dogs at the shelter that some of these supplements like Angstine and Composure also work to just kind of help a dog settle. It's and calming music and lavender and thunder shirts. But I think it's worth experimenting. But I think you're probably, in order to have a more perceptible impact, you probably need to layer things, combine things that are highly stimulating, and having an Adaptil collar or Adaptil diffuser, spraying bedding with Adaptil, and giving them a Composure before you leave or during a busy time of day, and putting a thunder shirt on if that's something that works for your dog, and having some music or a white noise. And so I think those are things that can't hurt and can help, but one by one, they may not have as dramatic an effect as what you need or want.
Okay. Most of the questions seem to be about barking at things that you can't see, or you have no idea what they're barking at, or they're barking in the middle of the night and you're thinking they smell something?
I think so the middle of the night stuff, I have 2 kids. I don't know, some people have kids, some people don't, so it's not it, but everyone is probably familiar with it, or was a kid. Yeah. So I mean, everyone's probably familiar with the concept of self-soothing. And in the middle of the night, that's sleepy time for dogs. So I would try to just, with as little interaction as possible, just help them go back to sleep and not try to kind of solve the case and figure out maybe they have to go to the bathroom. And I mean, maybe they do, maybe they have like maybe they ate something, but that's usually dogs going to sleep through the night. If they used to sleep through the night, they should be able to go back to sleeping through the night. And I wouldn't just interact too much. Just try to wait it out. With barking at things you can't see, or you don't know why they're barking, it's still the same. When we talked about, let me see if I can go back to here. I would say it's still the same interventions: interrupt, redirect. So call their name. I don't know why my dog is barking, but if I want her to stop, I want her either to stop because it's a nuisance, or stop because she's clearly, having an emotion and I want her to feel better. Then I interrupt her somehow. I call her name and I don't say no. That's just as an aside. Well, of course I do, because I can't always control my emotions. And I sometimes do automatic behaviors like I say no because, but I typically don't use no to interrupt my dog from doing this. I use her name and I just say Huckleberry. And there she looked at me. And so I'm just going to give her a little crumb of cat food. But I've worked on that so much with her that is almost no situation in which I can't get her attention. I've had her for 10 years. So, it's a 10-year reinforcement history. So if your dog knows their name and knows to turn their attention to you, then you can build on that and get them involved in something else. Maybe throw a ball or get them, just move them away from the place where they're barking. Reward it with whatever. It doesn't have to be food. It can be attention. It can be, tug. It can be whatever your dog likes. And then also about building impulse control. And making sure they have enough to do on their, throughout the day so that they feel like, I got to be a dog today. Now I can just sit here and do nothing.
There are also times when you have to take your leash. If your dog is barking outside, you may have to take your leash, get your dog and bring him inside. Or if you have a dog door and your dog is outside barking all the time, you may have to close the dog door more than you're used to. We have a dog door at my house and it's open unless I hear them bark. And if I hear them bark, they come in and the dog door closes. We also, I don't know how many of you could do something like this, but a lot of you mentioned neighbors getting upset. And I had one neighbor who got upset. And one of the things I told them was, anytime that you're having company, let me know ahead of time and I'll make sure that our dogs are inside. And I have another neighbor, because we know that our dogs will bark at each other across the fence. I know every weekday when she leaves for work, I know when she gets back, because she calls to say, I'll be home in 10 minutes. It's organized. And on weekends, we text each other so that the dogs aren't out the same time and they're not out there barking at each other. You have to be friends with your neighbors, or at least, have a neighbor who's pretty cooperative. But there are things you can come up with sometimes that you don't think of. It's a lot quieter here than it used to be. And just the act of calling a neighbor and saying, I'm really sorry. When I hear him bark, I will get him in. And please let me know anytime you're having company. Let me know ahead of time. And that does wonders.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Is it okay if I bring up a question that I saw in the chat?
Mm-hmm.
Please.
Someone mentioned that they bring their dog to a dog park, and there's one dog in particular that their dog continually goes up to and barks in their face. And as a secondary question to that, they asked, should they be using the dropping a bunch of treats in that context with other dogs around?
In
So
a
I just
dog
wanted
park?
to bring that up.
My heart.
My.
My heart just stopped beating.
How many fights do you want to see at one time?
So here's what I recommend for dog parks. Don't go. No, I'm just kidding.
No, you're not.
Not kidding. Yeah. But for some dogs, it is such a great release. And when dogs know each other and they kind of learn each other's play styles and their shorthand, it can be a wonderful experience for dogs, as long as it's not a mosh pit and there's just like 100 dogs and nobody's paying attention. But when it comes to that kind of like barking in the dog's face, it reminds me of the video from the beginning, with the pointer. I guess the question is, what happens next? Because a dog who will bark in another dog's face forever is hard to imagine. But what seems possible or likely is that there's some just sort of like demanding some kind of attention or play. It's not happening. Frustration builds. The best thing you can do in a dog park to kind of reinforce good behavior from your dog is practice calling them away, giving them a treat away from the fray. I used to keep treats like way up high in like a shirt pocket or like under a hat or something, because you don't want dogs mugging you, like everyone else's dog coming up and saying, oh, she's got hot dogs in her hat, but or in your pocket. But I like to, or I would put treats somewhere else, accessible, but just out of reach of the other dogs. And then I would call my dog away and, just practice recalls. It's not always going to work. And we have to understand that play is fun and being told to come away from play is really hard. But what I would do is practice calling your dog away from play, reward them with a treat somewhere far from the fray, or not too far because they may not want to come far away, but like somewhere out of the fray, and then send them back into play. And do that. Just because I think people don't always realize that play is super fun, but it can be too arousing, and dogs who are more mature typically will take breaks. They'll suddenly stop playing and go sniff. They know how to self-regulate, but dogs who are less skilled in self-regulating can just get too wound up. And so it's a good idea to what? A dog who barks?
Speak of the devil. I want to clarify one thing. You're not doing your practicing of recall at the dog park. You have to have a really good recall that your dog has learned elsewhere before your dog is going to leave another dog to come to you. And if your dog, and very few dogs have a recall that's that good, again, leashes have a purpose, and this would be one of them. You may end up having to leave.
Yeah. I would be careful though. I mean, I know Deborah, you know this, but I'm just going to jump in and just clarify. If you need to put your dog on a leash and leave, I would try to do that away from other dogs as well, because sometimes the moment there's tension, a dog who's near,
right,
like you put your dog at a disadvantage if they're on a leash and nobody else is. But yeah, if your dog has enough, like that may be a sign that your dog has had enough play and they have run out of impulse control and willpower and, discipline and whatever. And they're done. They should go home. And I think it's a good rule of thumb to go to the dog park only when there are not too many dogs there and not stay very long, because play is not meant to be like a marathon. It's kind of a sprint, and it doesn't need to go on and on and on and on, because that can lead to, I remember when I was a kid, my brother and I would be like fooling around. And my dad would just be like stony face. And he'd go, someone's going to cry. And we'd be like, what do you mean? And sure enough, like somebody would accidentally, poke someone in the eye or do so, like go too far. And then everybody be mad and crying and fighting. And that can happen at a dog park.
We have a handout on dog play and dog parks website that I'm sure Nicole can find and put the link up for. It's under Life with Dogs. Just in case you need that help, Nicole. There's also some questions about dogs barking when visitors come.
Yeah. That's another, I have this feeling about doors. I assume it's talking about as the people arrive, enter, and, get settled. Some people say, put your dog away until everyone's settled down and sitting, and then let your dog out. And it depends. Also, it depends on why they're barking. Some dogs love visitors. They love, attention from new people. Some dogs are just afraid of people. They're barking because they're saying, you're too close to me. I really don't want you to come say hello to me. And some dogs are just barking because they're just aroused. They don't know, just feeling all the feelings. Doorways tend to be, and at the shelter, I noticed with gates too, they are like these portals that are just, they're fraught with emotion. They're portals into a different place, right? Like think about everything that happens by your door has emotion in it. Like you come home through the door, you take your dog out through the door, the mailman comes to the door, guests come to the door, all kinds of things are happening. It's a portal that is only sometimes open, so there's like frustration around the door, there's opportunity around the door. So I like to, and honestly, I'll be honest, we haven't had people over in so long because of COVID. I haven't even really had to deal with it. My dog is a very exuberant greeter. She will bark at everybody. But she settles down so fast that I've made an individual decision to kind of just focus my efforts elsewhere. But she gets so excited. The best thing I could do is have her away from the door where there's just less emotional intensity, period. Another thing you can do is have your dog on a leash and do that, like rewarding quiet, rewarding sits, rewarding any calm behavior they give you, reward that and make that into a training opportunity. So that you have some control over your dog. Usually distance is, the farther away your dog is from the people, the more they're going to be able to control themselves. If your dog is barking because they're afraid, they don't have to interact with anybody. I know a lot of clients with fearful dogs who don't want to meet your friends. I'm sorry, they just don't. And your friends want to meet them. And I know, and it's, all dogs are for petting, aren't they? No, they're not. I'm sorry. If a dog is telling you don't come closer, if the bark is like telling you, I don't want you to come any closer, we have to listen to them and be their bodyguard and their their agent, and just say they would be happier in another they would be happier out of the picture. So again, it depends on what the barking is about. If it's just over exuberant greeting, you can either put them away or use it as a training opportunity to build impulse control. And if it's because they're afraid, just let them go, let them opt out.
Unfortunately, it's not until April, but it's early April, April 3rd. We're going to have a webinar on calm greetings, whether it's at the door or outside on a walk. And we've had that one before. It's very good, and it'll give you ideas because everyone has that problem with people coming to the door.
Yeah. The door is a loaded place. It just is. Everything happens by the door. So yeah.
I want to thank you very much. It is 4:00.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, I know. Time goes when you're having fun. Everyone else, we're going to leave chat up because y'all were really involved today and helped each other out a lot, which is why I like people coming in person. You get so much more out of listening to each other. So
I love that you just said in person, because now Zoom counts as in person.
Oh, did I say in person? Yeah, well, this is, yeah.
You take what you can get. But yeah.
And if you are here from another country outside the US, just for our own curiosity, go ahead and put in where you're from. Okay. I see Mexico City already. Anyway, thank you very much, Karen, and we will see you again. Bye, everybody.
Bye.